Hi, and welcome everybody to another episode of the Decommunity Podcast. I'm Roy Bernheim. I'm one of the co-founders of Decommerce, bringing you the inside scoop of everything brands, community, and innovation. And today, I'm excited to have Andrea McKay here. She's the founder of halfmoon. Hey, Andrea, nice
Hey,
to have you
Roy.
here.
Great
Hey,
to be here.
and thanks. And I'd love for you to introduce yourself to everybody.
Would love to. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I am Andrea, the founder of halfmoon. We are an elevated wellness brand. We really offer props supporting movement, meditation, and recovery, and have been doing so for about 10 years. So we have quite the story to tell.
So it's a decade this year that you reached. Congratulations on this really big milestone. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
And in our previous chat, you mentioned that community was really important to you. And I'd love to hear in your words what community means to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a broad topic, but at the core, community is the essence of the brand. If I think back to before I even launched Half Moon, which 10 years ago it was actually called Be Yoga, we launched through community. So I was part of this thriving wellness community, which at the time was really, really focused around yoga specifically. And I literally launched by sharing the brand and the product with individuals in the community and getting their feedback. And everything expanded from there. So the core of the brand and the business and everything that we are today really stems from community and we've grown with our community. And, everything we do is geared towards our community, whether it's our communication, every product we launch is inspired by the community. All of our feedback comes from the community. I'm immersed myself in the community every week. I get to visit studios, for example, as part of my job. Every week I visit new ones. And so really the core of the business and everything that expands from there is centered around community. And it's everything. I'm so grateful to be a part of that.
And I'm looking forward to diving into this in more depth to understand more on the how. And before we go into the today, I'd love to understand when you started. You mentioned you started with the community. Share us a bit more what that process was like. What does that mean? How did you start that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's such a long process. The seed was really planted actually 21 years ago when I was doing my master's in Australia. That's where the inspiration stems from, because I don't know if you've been to Australia, but when I was there in 2003, I was a young 20-something-year-old, only Canadian in this master's program I was doing, really unsure of myself, really shy. And I get there, and now I say yoga found me, or I found yoga is what I used to say. Yoga was at every street corner. The surfers would flow into the yoga practice. Next to the studio was a juice bar. Next to the juice bar was a tarot card and crystal shop. People were running. Instead of hot dog stands, it was like fresh mango stands. The entire energy was so vital and so focused around one's well-being. And I caught that bug. Fortunately, it's a good bug to catch. And I caught that bug. Truly, for me, it was really yoga that I was just taken by while doing my MBA. And so the kind of the intersection of business and wellness at the time, yoga was planted 21 years ago. I didn't launch the business until 11 years after that, 10 years ago. But that's where it first started. But I just kind of like packed it away in my mind, kind of subconsciously knowing that eventually I would get towards creating this business centered around well-being. But the actual inception of Be Yoga, which is now Be Half Moon, came about probably 12 years ago. I was actually at the time working for my father's manufacturing business, which was so outside of my sweet spot, my comfort zone. It was me, again, in my 20s, and a bunch of over 50 male. Like, the culture was so different. It was like they'd never had a maternity leave. It was all B2B, business to business, sales and business development. But I just felt drawn towards this. I felt like there was an opportunity there. And so, my father reluctantly brought me on, and I just put my head down to prove myself with these men who were like, oh, it's the boss's daughter. Anyway, I'm getting way into the weeds, but I eventually was put in charge of running a rubber manufacturing business, which again, outside of my comfort zone, but I can put my head down and do the work. I did that, and one day I was in the R&D lab, found a super grippy rubber compound, and said half jokingly to the 70-year-old R&D specialist, oh, this would be a great yoga mat. And he laughed. I was like, oh, ho, ho, Andrea. But the moment I said it, I could not forget it. I just like could not get it out of my brain. And so that's when the concept of building an incredible mat came to be. And after about 11 to 12 months of prototyping and seeding the product with the community, which I was part of, I had an incredible product. And then I built this brand truly just based on my own inspiration. At the time, it was Bee Yoga and the Bee Mat. And it was all about being yourself and trusting our products to support you in being whoever you need to be on any given day and meeting you where you are. And so we had the product, the brand. I built a little website, not on Shopify, and seeded the product in our community. And that's simply put how it started. The cool thing about that time is it was a time 10, 11 years ago when independent brands were coming out of the woodwork and the larger brands were starting to lose their cachet. And I was riding that wave. Like I didn't want to go to Starbucks anymore. I wanted to go to the local independent shop. And so we kind of were fortunate timing wise to ride this wave of people really starting to value small, independent, local brands. So that's how it started 10, 11 years ago. And from there, it expanded again with the community.
And that, I think this is fascinating, and also how it grew into your life. And it wasn't just you went to business school, okay, but you didn't just do a presentation and built a business case and went out there and just went through the check boxes, but it really grew naturally into your life from what it sounds like. And
Yeah.
there, in that process, from your first, like, oh, this could be a yoga mat, to then having, let's say, the first product that you actually went out with, what was that iteration process like, feedback? And how much feedback did you collect, and how do you weigh it? Because you
Yeah.
can't take up all the feedback because it's almost impossible.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I am sometimes to a fault a very like intuition driven, guttural person. And especially back then, I had naivete on my side. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs say this where, having that naivete as a young entrepreneur often facilitates you taking larger risks because you don't really think of the potential downfalls and you're not as wise to all the things that can go wrong. So at the time, I got feedback from local studios and studio owners and managers, but I didn't have a list of, okay, I need 11 points of feedback and X points. I didn't have that. I just went with the fact that every time I witnessed someone getting on this B mat, the resounding feedback was, wow. And I ran with that. And it was more of an energy. Like I felt that there was momentum and energy behind this far greater than myself. And even after launching the brand, now I can look back in hindsight. Didn't realize it when I was in it. And granted, I launched the business when I was 6 months pregnant. So I was going through other stuff at the same time. This was actually a really fun hobby for me, a distraction from, night feeding and not sleeping. But I digress. The first 3 years of the brand and the business and the community, it was magic. It took on a life of its own. It was a giant snowball effect of growth. And I was just on the side of my desk, like a little corner of my desk during having 2 kids and mat leave. It just was magic. It just grew. And that's because of the community. So going back to your original question, like my metrics around product trial and feedback were pretty minimal, if at all existent. It was more just the feedback was resoundingly positive time and time again that I just intuitively felt like, okay, we have something here.
Wow. So really feeling into the feedback that you were getting. And at the beginning, I feel like also you knew a lot of people in that space, and everybody that you started to, well, not even work with, but it started to engage with your product. You
Yeah.
could see how they could use it and how much joy came out of it. And as you started then expanding, so what was the next stage like from there? So you had the product and you started selling.
Yeah.
What was that transition like?
So our growth started with the studio channel. So that's more of like a very unique wholesale channel. It's not your traditional large retail buyer. It's, as I said, the studio, which is a very nuanced channel and really the heart of our business. I treasure every single one of our studio partners. And today we sell to over 6,000 studios. But that's really where it started. And that's almost where all the first movers are when you talk about like, the cycle of purchase cycle. You have your first movers in the studio and then things grow from there. Our next major milestone, aside from just like launching the BMAT, which to this day is our hero product, and really seeing that just take off on its own trajectory on its own. About like a year into the business, I hired someone part-time, and it was the biggest deal for me. I remember, and it was the best decision I made. Erin, who I hired at that time, ended up being with us for 5 years. And like me, she had that entrepreneurial vibe. So she wore a million hats and excelled at wearing every single one of them. And with that, we started thinking, okay, how can we expand our product line? So that was kind of like the second milestone, was expansion into new products. So from the BMAT, we went into other hard goods that were very logical, kind of add-on purchases like the block, the strap. And then we really wanted to get into the soft goods category, which was blankets, meditation cushions, bolsters. And we ran into many dead ends in endeavoring to do so. And as soon as I thought that we had exhausted all the options I knew of, and I was about to just kind of abandon that effort, this was about almost 3 years into the business, I got an email from the founder of a business called Half Moon. And for me, getting that email, it was like getting an email from Jennifer Aniston, because me being a yogi for so long, Half Moon was the brand. It was the only brand aside from the one I had started. And the founder of Half Moon, basically, long story short, she took a leap of faith, said, Andrea, I love what you're doing. I see our ethos align. I'm looking towards retirement. She was nearing 60. Are you interested in buying my business? It was such a pinch me moment. And long story short, after about 10 months of courting each other, I ended up acquiring Half Moon. So that was the next milestone. And in acquiring Half Moon, I then had the entire soft goods product category, because Half Moon was known for those blankets, meditation cushions, bolsters. And B Yoga had all of the hard goods. So then I had like a full product lineup 3 years into the business. And I also added on a whole new set of customers. So that was a big moment. Little did I preconceive or premeditate the challenges that would come with buying another business based on the West Coast. We were on the East Coast, and integrating two businesses, two cultures, two teams. Hard, but that was the next milestone.
How was that?
Really hard. Really, really hard. I put a lot of pressure on myself in everything I do, and I felt a huge sense of urgency to really integrate quickly and to kind of rationalize the two businesses into one. But the concept of merging two cultures and two teams that have different ideologies, whew, that took a lot of work. So, today we're one company, one brand, one team, one culture, but getting to that was a huge uphill challenge for me, and a huge opportunity of growth for myself. I hired almost like a culture consultant who was rooted in like spirituality, because she just fit with our brand, and worked with her for 2 years to help basically build trust between the two teams and ensure that our communication lines were super open and that we over communicated. But really what it took was a lot of time and a lot of communication. But that was hard, especially because I had acquired a business that was bigger than my own. So they're like, who's this kid and this baby brand buying this 30-year-old brand? It was a big challenge, but we got through it.
Oh, and I'd love to dive on that. So that was the internal view. And what about the outside community? How are they engaging?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great question. No one's asked that before. The feedback we got was very supportive, because that our community is that extremely supportive. And Half Moon and B Yoga overlapped. Like, our communities were very similar and just really supportive, and almost like, this makes sense, because we were values aligned, which is the core of both cultures. Our community was really welcoming and supportive, and said that it was almost intuitive. So had they not been, it would have been that much harder. Yeah. Yeah.
So that also supported you to move forward and get closer together. That
Yeah.
sounds
I
like.
never thought about that, but it's true. Yeah.
Yeah, because it sounds like it probably were also the same yoga studios, or at least a good overlap, since you
Yeah.
reached so many. So that must have been really interesting for them as well. So we were talking about how your community supported you during this growth process, this merge process. And now fast forwarding into a few years down the line, where this community has merged and has also further grown. How do you see this community today, the inner and the outer communities together?
Yeah, we always look at our inner and outer community. So I like that you kind of added that additional consideration. My mandate from day one was like, I want us to grow with integrity, and I want to be able to maintain an internal culture and a connection with our external community with deep integrity, despite growing and being larger. So I feel very connected to our community because I actually read all of our social comments and posts, and I actually at the past year started being the one who replies to them because I learned that, well, one, it's hard to keep someone in that role, but also that I just intuitively can answer these questions or the comments really, really quickly. And I'm so connected to the brand values that, as strange as it is that we've gotten older and larger, that I'm more involved in the social commentary. But I just think it's a great way for me to stay super connected to the community and to ensure really genuine correspondence. So that's one thing. Our customer satisfaction team has always been deemed so important to the core of the business, and that's never changed. So we've really always opted to shy away from like bots and custom responses because as that may seem inefficient, it just doesn't align with our brand values of really being true and connected to our community. So we stay connected that way. And we also have a wholesale team, which solely connects with our studios of 6,000. It's a very robust team. And most of them are yoga, Pilates, bar teachers, and really brand enthusiasts. Like they knock on our door because they love the brand and that's how they're hired. And they are connecting day in, day out with our community in a really genuine way. Like I love liaising with the wholesale team, and I do almost every week because they're so connected in that way. And even our product development team, like we're always polling our community for feedback on what prints we're launching, what colors, what products they want. So I'm really grateful and really proud that I feel like despite growing, we try to be as connected as we can with our community because that's what creates us, that's what fuels us, that's what supports us, and we want to support that community back. Also, from an internal team perspective, I place so much value on the internal culture. And I really say that we hire first for fit and second for function. When I interview people, my interviews are actually really quick because I'm really looking at their fit. I'm not diving into, do you know how to use Excel or blah, blah, blah. I really am just looking at, what are you inspired by? What are your values? And trying to ensure, and like you can't always get this right, but really trying to ensure that they espouse the values that our business espouses. So all of that in the name of staying true to the community, which links to staying true to our values and who we are.
And that's to put that in the forefront is especially now when it's easy to just bring in some bots, feel is probably, it's courageous also and takes a lot of gut to do, but it's also super powerful from what it sounds like. I'd love to understand more how you do that, especially in such a automated, fast-paced, optimized world. How do you do it, for example, that you mentioned the feedback loops, that you still get feedback loops in from users? How do you do that?
Feedback. So we do a lot of like type form surveys through our Klaviyo emails or things like that. We use mail merge. So our wholesale team emails their different groups through mail merge, but they're also often requesting feedback. And then through social platforms, we'll do a lot of surveys to get like through Instagram mainly. We're not super up to snuff on TikTok. Up to snuff, terrible word. But those are kind of like the avenues, as well as, I'm in studios every week. Our wholesale team's in studios every week. Our customer satisfaction is documenting the feedback that they get. So it's really a multitude of avenues that we trust, and we place value in every point of feedback that we secure.
So really on every parts of the business, you're collecting it in. And
yeah,
that network, like when do you do events, or are there other types of forms where you nurture that culture, or how do you go about building it?
Yeah, events are so powerful and such a huge element of how our community grew in the early days. And we really lost that during COVID, which hurt us, not necessarily the business. Our business did well through COVID, but it almost felt like we kind of lost that connection for a little bit. And so I'm really happy and excited that we're getting that back because it's so important to the brand and staying connected to the community. So for example, like when we did our 10-year anniversary, I'm really bad at celebrating milestones. I think a lot of people can resonate with that, where you just kind of, especially founders, you just put your head down and on to the next. But I forced myself to celebrate our 10-year anniversary. And I'm glad I did. It was hard, but I kind of knew I had to. We threw a huge event called Tenergy in Toronto because that's our birthplace. and attracted hundreds of people to this really hip venue and just hosted this kind of 3-part movement meditation recovery series with some of our longstanding, most supportive teachers. People just came out of the woodwork for that. And the energy was insane. It was so supportive and vibrant and inspired. And I mean, honestly, I feel like I personally took so much away from that celebration. So I'm so glad I forced it. But I know the community did too. And it really generated so much buzz and so much brand love. So we are doing more of that on smaller scales. We love supporting other events through offering samples or through, doing panels, talks, things like that. But all that to say that, yeah, events are a huge element of supporting our community, engaging our community, inspiring our community. And it's definitely one of my favorite elements of this business.
I was going to say, are you going to wait another 10 years for another big event? But it sounds like there are many events
Yeah,
coming up.
yeah, for sure.
And when we think in terms of the physical event and the digital world, how do you see the two worlds interact, merge, or be separate? How do you see that?
Yeah, I feel like they're very supportive of each other. So they're complementary. I definitely think that our community gets more out of the in real life connection, but then that's always amplified on digital platforms, which is also like people feel the inspiration through digital. But I think the root of the connection in the community really comes from the in person experience. That can be through our events, but it can also simply be from practicing in a studio that's a partner of ours and trying our product and really being wowed by the product too. I really, really do value kind of those trial opportunities, product trial opportunities, and community connection in real life opportunities. Social is magical and great at reinforcing the beautiful elements of the brand. But I think that we wouldn't be where we are today without that kind of in real life community connection.
And that leads me to my next question when peeking a little bit into the future. Where do you see, first of all, your brand going? Like what excites you going forward? And then after, I'd love to talk a little bit more about how you see those worlds and your focus going into offline, online.
I feel like we're kind of entering a new stage. I think with, getting out of the kind of post COVID world where the world feels like it's open again. And I really do think it is. That is really inspiring our team to just continue to grow, to share our brand platform and our products globally. We have such a strong foothold definitely in Canada. We're growing in the US, but we're seeing so much incremental demand in places like Costa Rica or in Europe, basically, pockets throughout the world. And that really inspires me because I really believe we have a unique offering that resonates with. It doesn't matter where you are geographically. And I'm really motivated to continue to build the brand from a geographical perspective. So I'd say that that's what lies ahead, as well as just more truth, holding on to our core beliefs, our values, our community, and always staying true to that despite growth. That's been my mandate from day one when we were tiny. And I'm really motivated to hold on to that as we grow as best we can.
And it sounds like this was really the key to making it so successful over the years. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, I think so. I think people feel brands and they feel when things are disingenuous. And we've definitely made mistakes, even from a branding perspective, over the years where we've lost our way and whatnot. But overarchingly, yes, I do think that that's been a huge element in our success because people feel the truth and they know that we're doing things with deep integrity and for the right reasons. And I'm very proud of that. And the team feels that too. That's what our team is motivated by.
And talking about motivation, I mean, you shared the motivation from when you started 10 years ago, almost
Mm-hmm.
12 years ago, when the ideas started
Mm-hmm.
coming up. Now, 10 years later, you've done so many things, had so much success. You purchased and merged another brand into your business, all these things. What motivates you today?
It's a great question. Well, I think one of the biggest challenges over the past 10 years was leaning into my leadership. I found that very hard. As I've mentioned, like I'm pretty shy and soft spoken and, not the traditional leader that I was raised to think was the only way. So I think continuing to lead into knowing that my mode of leadership is okay. And it's more of like a merger of like male and female type leadership, which is a whole other long conversation. But I think leaning into my knowing and my experience and wisdom as a leader and supporting my team to grow is a huge motivator for me. we have such a strong team, and I'm so proud of the team and how far they've come. And watching the team grow really brings me a lot of joy. So it's really my focus, and my motivations have changed so much over 10 years, especially having two kids now, 10 and 8 years old. I'm also more focused on supporting them. So if I can have the team doing more and let go and really just be kind of the guide, the leader that's less hands-on, that also helps me in my personal life to support my kids who are entering really formative years too. So I think it's continuing to lean into my leadership and supporting the team to grow.
Wow. And like it sounds like you're really like nurturing that inner community around you to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's fascinating. And where do you see, let's say, from letting go a little bit and having other people take on more of the leadership, maybe even, or responsibility, let's say, what do you see are things that now start coming up that maybe didn't come from you or you didn't have thought of that you're now
Yeah.
seeing starting to happen and you're curious? What are those kind of things and how did you handle those?
Well, first off, I'm not good at letting go. So that's been a real work in progress for me. But I will say there are people on the team that are way more talented and smarter than I am in very important elements of the business. For example, I don't thrive in operations. I don't enjoy operations. So I have a team that supports me with supply chain management, purchasing, analytics, warehousing and fulfillment, all of that. I mean, I did that for many years, but that's not my sweet spot. And now I have a team that's way more adept than I am at managing that and bringing considerations to the table that I would never be able to. Similarly with e-commerce, I'm like a dinosaur in the e-commerce world. I did get us onto Shopify probably 7 years ago, and that was such a obviously great move. But from there, like I know very little. And so I learn new things like almost every week from our e-commerce lead and from the team that supports her. So people are bringing so much value to the table that I just couldn't bring today. And I think it's great.
So it's that interactive game almost of yeah, giving leadership and direction and then also letting go, trusting.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For
And
sure.
it's great to hear that, even after 10 years, that that's still something that is happening and that is constantly shifting from what it sounds like for you even.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the only constant has been change, as cheesy as that sounds. I'm a change agent. I love change. So I think I'm in like the right field, sometimes to a fault though. But I love growing myself personally. I love watching the team grow and supporting the team growing. And I love watching the brand grow in healthy ways. Sometimes growth can be unhealthy. And so, yeah, I really value growth overall.
So you said you see growth happening potentially also abroad more now. And
Hmm.
I'm really excited to follow that journey and see where it's going to go. And I want to thank you so much for sharing all your insights and your story here.
Thank you for having me.
This was wonderful. And question also, where could people find you, find the brand if they wanted to find out more?
So you can find us online at behalfmoon.com. And then on Instagram, you can find us at behalfmoon_official. And myself, I'm at being Andrea McKay. So yeah, come find us.
Amazing. Andrea, thanks so much. Talk very soon.
Thank you, Ray. It was so fun to chat.